What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down why tomorrow is going to be another very important day as we have Nvidia's earnings, not to mention the FOMC minutes all coming out the same day. So I'm going to break down how these things can affect the markets, what are some important levels to be watching for, and why the market's at a very critical point right now, in my opinion. But before I break down all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I am personally not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire community as a whole. So anyways, let's break down what's happening to the market. One of the things I mentioned in the morning was that when it comes to SPY, we had this range to be watching. 448, this zone right here would be our support. 452 is resistance. We were stuck back and forth for almost 3.5 days. And I told you, whichever way we broke would determine if we get one more push on SPY or if the market comes back down. And what happened was, as we saw the buyers stepping in and accumulating shares during the pre-market, they started pushing this thing right off the bat, and we ended up breaking 452 on SPY. And once we broke 452, this thing began to launch all the way up to 455, making a very, very nice bullish move. But the question is, will we keep going into tomorrow, or are we about to get some kind of rug pull? So the answer to this is going to depend on the data that comes out for tomorrow and how we end up reacting to some key levels. Right now, the market's becoming more greedy. We used to be neutral, now we're greedy. We're getting closer and closer to the extremes, and we're seeing some indicators turning extremely greedy. Market momentum is very, very greedy right now, as we're once again very far from the 125-day moving average. And on top of this, many indicators are becoming much less fearful than before. The put and call option positioning is now on extreme greed mode. And this is once again something that I see as a red flag for the rally. And I think that it means you should be very careful, especially at the levels we're at. Market volatility is neutral. The VIX is once again very low, below the 50-day moving average. And that's once again another signal that makes me very careful. On top of this, other indicators are just extremely greedy. We're seeing the buyers coming back. People are just continuing to turn greedy. And this could be signaling a shift in the market, but it's not always guaranteed just yet. So I just wanted to add that tomorrow, when the market opens, we have some data coming up. We have some housing data and things like that. It's nothing too crazy. But then at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the FOMC minutes, and this is going to be very important. So the FOMC minutes are just a paper report of the FOMC meeting. It's going to be a summary with more insights about the opinions of the Fed. So we're going to find out more information about what the specific Fed speakers were thinking, what their views are, how they may affect their policies on when it comes to monetary policy and such, and also what Jerome Powell could be thinking going forward. So more information about the Fed, more insights on the Fed's projected rate hike targets, and also more information about the current economy. All of this stuff is going to affect the market for tomorrow. And this report that's coming out at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time could cause some volatility. If the Fed signals at the fact that they don't want to pause, or if they signal that they're not going to cut rates for another year or so, this could cause the stock market to just shake to some extent, maybe even drop a bit. But if the Fed starts suggesting they're going to cut sooner than expected, this could cause the market to rally. So we want to be very careful, and we'll be waiting to see what this says at 2 p.m. So it's going to be very important to watch this and watch for volatility at that time. Then once all of this comes out, whatever move comes is not going to be the bigger move, because the biggest catalyst, in my opinion, for Wednesday and also for Friday is going to actually be Nvidia's earnings, which is going to be after market close tomorrow. Now, we have Kohl's coming out during the open, Lowe's and Best Buy, and just a couple more retails. But the biggest one is going to be Nvidia. Nvidia is going to shake the market up, and this is going to be making a big move most likely. The market's expecting a 40-point move from Nvidia. That's what the market is saying is going to likely happen. I can't promise you that's going to happen, but if it does happen, it is going to have a big effect on SPY, the QQQ, Tesla, and many tickers out there. So anyways, now I want to break down some important developments. SPY currently looks bullish. We're continuing to break out. We're making higher highs and higher lows, and there's no sign of us breaking down yet. However, I do want to note that historically, if you look at what happened back right before the market started pulling back in August, we were at the exact same zone between this 455 and 457 zone. So the 457 is basically that zone up there. And that in turn is where the market shifted directions and started to come right back down. So there's a possibility, a real risk and a possibility that we're about to see something similar, but not a guarantee. And we just want to be watching to see how the market responds to these resistance levels, right? Other tickers out there, such as Tesla, are kind of lagging behind. Apple is kind of flat, trying to push a little bit more. QQQ is looking bullish. Nvidia is continuing to look bullish. And I'll be breaking down more details about them over the next few minutes. So first off, starting with SPY, okay, we're going to be watching for this retracement right over here because we actually got this breakout from this 450 area. So I'm going to be looking to see where this thing retraces just a little bit and then to see if this thing continues from where we basically were. If we start from this bottom down here, we can actually start down there, maybe even a higher level. But if we do start there, we have, a possibility of retesting potentially 453.75, if not 452.9, then like rebounding. So there could be a slight retracement, but it may be just very, very minor, and the market could just continue pushing as we have a strong uptrend being respected. We also have this trend line that's acting as support right over here. We'll be watching to see if this holds. This could just be like a very violent uptrend continuation for tomorrow, and we could just see this thing continue to blast off. But overall, this chart is still looking bullish. There's no sign of us basically coming down yet. And we'll be watching to see if it's either the FOMC minutes at 2 p.m. or NVIDIA's earnings that turns this around. So for SPY, you're going to be watching support right here at 454 around that zone. If we lose this, then watch 453 flats. This imbalance down there, then 452 below that. If we lose that, we could get very close to 450. And then for resistance, you're going to be watching this tight resistance at 455. If we break this, watch 455.5 and then 456. If we get above that, we have a lot of these zones. I actually highlighted a lot of the areas where we got rejections in the past. So we're going to be watching resistance at all these different levels throughout the 456s, 457, 457.5, and 458. And if we get above 458, then 460 is coming. But these are some levels to watch for because historically we've gotten rejections up here. So you're going to be paying very close attention to the 456s and then through the 458 area. And we'll see if we get some kind of rejection or not. Whether or not it happens will depend on Nvidia and these other tickers. But right now, SPY still looks bullish and it looks like it's going to try to break 455 tomorrow. It looks like it still has some steam left. For the QQQ, this thing just broke the high we made previously, and we're actually at the highest level we've been since 2022. So with that being said, since this thing is pumping so hard, you're going to be watching 391. If we manage to break this, Nvidia could push a bit higher, which could push this even higher tomorrow. But after Nvidia's earnings comes out, right, that's going to be after close, then everything could change from there. So you're going to be watching 392, 392.5, and then 393 as three resistance levels. For support, watch 390. If we lose this, watch this imbalance towards 388. In my opinion, there's no sign of the QQQ being done. It could retrace a little bit towards 390, maybe a little lower, and then try to rebound. But once again, guys, the chart still looks bullish. There's no sign of it breaking down just yet. For Nvidia looks very strong. It just broke its all-time high. It's continuing to push, and we have this 504 to 505 resistance. If we break this, the next level is going to be 508. Then we have this thing potentially pushing up to 510 and 512. I mean, there is definitely potential for Nvidia to push higher, but I would be very careful because sometimes, or maybe a lot of the time, when stocks are pumping approaching their earnings, it doesn't always have a good ending after earnings come out. The daily chart is forming a bearish divergence on Nvidia. The 4-hour time frame happens to be doing something very similar. We have a strong one, a strong triple bearish divergence on Nvidia. It doesn't guarantee anything. It just means that there is a risk of somewhat of a sell-off, but not a guarantee. Nothing is guaranteed until we see what earnings do. But I just want to warn everyone that it's kind of risky looking and trying to buy Nvidia at these high levels. But that doesn't mean it can't like blast off and surprise everyone. There's always that possibility. It just looks a tiny bit less likely. But I just want to warn you about that, about what these technicals are showing. So we'll be watching to see if Nvidia breaks down tomorrow or not after earnings. Before earnings come out, it might push higher towards like 510 or so. Could push the market up higher, but like I said before, you want to be very careful. On Tesla, Tesla has a decent looking setup right here. It made an attempt to pop a bit, could be forming like an inverse cup and handle. And it's not looking that strong because of all the negative news involving Elon Musk. Also because some analysts said some negative things about the Cybertruck and they're reducing their price targets on Tesla. So for Tesla, it's very choppy, very sideways. You could interpret this as like an inverse head and shoulders, and it could try to accumulate a bit more. But in order for us to get to this imbalance at 240, we want to see Tesla try to get above 238, and so far we've struggled to get all the way up there. So it's kind of flat right now, very choppy, not really doing a whole lot. It came down below our trend line of support, came right back up, but it's still not looking that strong. If we're bearish, you're going to be watching this thing break below 231. If we fail that, watch 230 and then 227 right about here. 227 happens to be very close to where our 20 EMA happens to be. If that fails us, then 225 will be the next level on Tesla, way down here. If we're bullish, you want to see Tesla break out above 238 and then push for 240 and 242. In my opinion, the chart looks a little bit weak. There could be an inverse head and shoulders forming. So there is potential it tries to respect this trend line and maybe push a little bit higher going into tomorrow. And I think that there could be a little upside approaching the FOMC minutes. But then once the minutes come out, there's no telling what's going to happen. Tesla could still get rug pulled with the markets. If Nvidia misses on earnings, Tesla could also get a rug pull. So anything could happen with Nvidia. Anything can happen to the market, so I'm not too sure about what's going to happen by Wednesday because it depends on these external factors. All I can tell you is that for now, we're going to likely try to uptrend a little bit more and try to make our way back up to 238. But Tesla's very choppy and very sideways at the same time. Finally, one of the last ones I'm going to go over on TradingView is going to be Aapl stock. Aapl is still on a nice uptrend, holding up quite nicely, and you can see how its support is still prevailing. So we have this support zone right about here. We can actually draw out this trend line in a very simple manner. You can draw it out just like this. You'll also find resistance just about here as well. So it's basically testing these levels very, very closely. We can also draw out this previous trend line just like this. It just shows that Aapl may have more potential upside. But if anything, I would say that I would be very careful with Aapl because we're approaching this very, very critical resistance between 192 and 192.5. So Aapl, yes, it might backtest 191, balance and start pushing for like 192. But up here, we have some tight resistance, and we might just see Aapl chop around a bit. Then I'm expecting a big reaction after the FOMC minutes, and then after Nvidia's earnings, we will see if the new data pushes Aapl up to 195, which is looking less likely, or if Apple's about to get a rug pull back down to 185. My guts tells me we might see some downside, but just to be safe, we want to watch. And one of the reasons why I say that is because when you look at Aapl, we have this is looking like a quadruple bearish divergence on Aapl, which could lead to some downside in the future. It is still in the process of developing. These don't always play out. Sometimes they could be invalidated, but in this case, I would still be careful because Apple is quite overbought. So there is a risk of that potentially forming. The QQQ also has a bearish divergence. This is like a double, not really a triple anymore. We'll see if this causes anything for the QQQ, but I'm just going to be patient and wait and see how it pans out because the bigger factors are not technicals. The bigger factors are going to be the FOMC minutes and Nvidia's earnings. So with that being said, I'm just going to go over a couple of others very quickly. Try to be very fast with this video. So far, it's looking a little weak. We ended up testing 6.5, which is what I called out yesterday. But I think it may make an attempt to balance and try to fill this imbalance and come back to 6.75 and just trade very sideways. The IWM is trying to push a little higher towards 179. Small caps could end up making a big move depending on what we see from the minutes. If we're bullish, and this is like an inverse head and shoulders, we could see a move for about 180 plus. If we're bearish, you want to see it lose 177.5 and come back down towards 175. I personally I'm in the middle. It's going to depend a lot on what's said during the FOMC minutes and also Nvidia's earnings, but a big factor will be the minutes. I think that the policy from the Fed will affect a lot of small caps a lot. Microsoft is continuing to hold up decently, but I just want to note that off the pop today, it still once again formed this bearish divergence. It's still developing. It could pop a bit more towards 380, but we might see a rejection since it's looking kind of weak up there. So look for a little pop. If it keeps breaking out, then 385 is the next level. But if it fails at 380, it could reject depending on the minutes. So we'll just be waiting for that. AMD may hold up for the time being and try to retest 122, but Nvidia's earnings is going to affect it, so we'll be watching to see what Nvidia causes. On top of this, the VIX is continuing to drop, but it's in very, very oversold territory. The VIX is at this it's getting very close to these low levels where it tends to bounce in the 12s. So the VIX might bounce soon. I mean, we tend to see it bounce around the $12 area, 12.7 to 13. So this tells me there might be a rejection coming to the markets, but I don't know for sure until I see the catalysts. So we'll be very patient. The dollar is very, very oversold as well. We still have a bullish divergence developing on it. If it gets a bounce, this means the market might get a pullback soon. So we have some signals suggesting there might be a pullback looking at the dollar and the VIX. Coinbase is looking bullish. We could see this thing hit 110 and then reject. Watch resistance at 110. It still looks like it could push a little bit higher, especially thanks to crypto right now, as we're seeing many stocks pushing, not to mention the new regulations. Google is at 138. If we break this, watch for 140, then a rejection. Could push a little bit more, but you want to be very careful because we're not looking that strong on the RSI. Looking at Alibaba, in case you're interested, we could see this inverse head and shoulders play out. It's forming kind of like a cup. I'm going to be looking for a push for about 80 to 81. There is definitely potential there. The 10-year Treasury yield, although it's dropping, I do want to warn you all that on the daily time frame, it could be forming a potentially bullish formation here. If we end up bouncing from here, this could be forming a divergence, and if this starts pushing back up, this could once again signal the market's getting ready to flip. I think that I saw an inverse head and shoulders somewhere here. I was looking at this like a while back. Uh, we see a bullish divergence, but I'm not seeing the inverse head and shoulders anymore. If this plays out, if we get a bounce on this and we try to fill some of these gaps above, that could be bearish for the markets. The FOMC minutes may affect this. You want to be very careful and see if that causes any upside for the 10-year Treasury yield. For Amazon, Amazon is once again looking very flat. It may just remain stationary for the time being. There's an accumulation here. It might push a little higher for about 148 and then reject because this imbalance right here is acting as a magnet. So it might push a little hard towards 148 and reject. There's potential for that. Meta is at resistance. We're at this 340 to 342 resistance. We will see how it reacts to that. The last time it hit this level, it actually rejected. So we'll see if that happens again. So be very careful on Meta. We could see it retest 342. If we break this, then 345 is next. If we fail to do so, expect it to come back down to 335 or below that. All right, guys, that's it for this video. I want to make this one kind of quick. I hope that my insights were helpful for all of you guys out there. And get ready for tomorrow. It's going to be a very important day. All right, thank you. Have a great day. Have a good night. And I'll see you guys tomorrow morning. Thanks again, and peace out.